everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I got a brand new book, just got this in the mail from Amazon, just released, Big Ugly by Ellice Weaver. This is out from Avery Hill Publishing, and I think this is the first book this year that I remember that I'm thinking is like contender for book of the year on my list. So really good book, really enjoyed it, and it's just speaking to a lot of my interest in comics right now, especially the way that the art is handled. So this almost, like, I don't know, for the last 2 years or so, because of what I envisioned for Bound that I'm finally working on now, finally kind of cruising through it now that I'm on summer break, is I was interested in like self-help illustration. That there's kind of like a genre there, and I think Ellice Weaver's like cartooning is very much in like the type of illustration that I was seeing in like women's health magazines and stuff like that. Very focused on shape and color, a lot of almost kind of like vector graphic looks, things like that. Stuff that looks like it's probably Procreate or Adobe Fresco. There's just like a whole kind of genre of illustration and cartooning that I've been really into in the last couple of years. Minimal use of line just to define edges you can't get to work with the shapes, things like that, or just like little rhythmic hits with line. Really kind of specifically chosen color palettes, all of those kinds of things. And the rhythms, you know, breaking everything's up on rhythms and grids, flatten out perspective, orthographic or isometric perspectives, or even just straight up flat like this where there's not really perspective at all. Like all of that's things that I've been really in love with. And then I think this is the first book I've seen. There's like Tommy Parrish and other people have these distorted figures and stuff like this, but I don't know, this one's the first one that really leverages that specific look that I'm loving in a comic to this level of success. So visually very in love with the book. And then in terms of the story, I think it's also a really interesting, really well written, just down to earth drama like I'm interested in. So that's really compelling to me, that we're just like dipping into some people's lives and kind of picking up on their drama and doing a character study and kind of a thematic study as well. So the story revolves around Mel and Matt. This is Mel, this is Matt. I don't think you ever really get an explanation why he's always wearing these headphones. Maybe on a second read I could pick that up, because I didn't start thinking about it till later in the book. But they're brother and sister, and they've been brought back together where they're having to live together, and they're kind of falling into old habits. And Mel is a pretty abusive sister, and that comes back up, and she's fairly manipulative and abusive to Matt later in life as well. And so you kind of see the abuses as kids, and you see the abuses as adults. I don't want to get too much into the story of it because it is a new book, so I don't want to give away a lot of spoilers, but that's kind of the core of the book, is the theme, like the kind of character exploration of two characters in a kind of psychologically at least abusive relationship. There's kind of two subplots cycling in that. One is that Mel has some medical issue where she's talking about she's having trouble peeing for some reason, and so she's currently sending away, she's trying to get doctors to listen to her, and no one will, which dealing with Tori over the last year, we've seen that firsthand. So she's sending away for like a 23andMe type of thing where you send them a vial of blood and they're going to do, I don't think she's getting genetic testing, but she's getting tested for some specific thing that she thinks might be causing her medical issues. And Tori and I had considered some genetic testing to try and find some things that doctors weren't willing for, but luckily we found a doctor who's willing to look into what we were suspicious of, and seems to actually be the case. So I get this whole scenario that Mel is dealing with about, if I get the genetic proof, then the doctors can't ignore me anymore, because that's exactly where we were at. And then also, like here, she's about to pass out and throw up because she's trying to collect her blood into this vial, and that would definitely be me as well. So right out the gate, this is like the first 2 pages, and I'm already completely absorbed in this story, because it relates so closely to a lot of things in my personal life, and then it's just like killing it on the art style, which is why I saw previews of this on Previews World and thought, yeah, that's 100%. Even if the story's crap, the art is for me. You see, even this is something that's pretty contemporary. I've seen this on prints recently when I go to art shows, and I've seen some of my students start to do it in graphic design classes and stuff, where it seems like more and more artists are very much interested in color palette, and people are showing their palettes as part of the art. And many times throughout the book, Ellice Weaver has like, okay, this is the scene, this is the color palette for that scene, which is kind of interesting. It's like sharing your secrets a little bit. I mean, really, an artist could go through and click on any of these colors and steal them anyways, but it almost feels like a little offering, you know, like here's the colors I was working with, and you could see them in isolation, so you don't see them in their relative context, or you don't have to try and say, well, this is like a pretty different color scheme than this because this is much more monochromatic and this has a variety of colors. But you realize that this is what the artist has confined themselves to. So even if someone's not using that exact palette, like giving it in that way, it still serves kind of like an educational purpose to anyone looking at it. Like, oh, okay, like I can say I'm going to use these, but then I'm only going to use these, or I could like use those and those. So I think it has that value for, you know, a younger artist reading that as well, which is cool. And then it's just like a nice little aesthetic thing I've noticed people doing lately. But I mean, you know, you look at an illustration like this and the way it's all flattened into shapes and the way the perspective's dealt with here, but then the floor is just a grid flattened out, and then you do have the wall over here kind of being in perspective, but not really on the same vanishing point as this. But it doesn't matter because, you know, none of this is on the same vanishing point. It just serves like formal design purposes, rhythms, shapes, spaces, things like that. And those are all the kind of factors I've been trying to incorporate in my own art, because I feel like they're what I've ignored most of my life as someone obsessed with line until now. And now that I'm obsessed with shape, seeing an artist like this killing it with the compositions is really fantastic. And also sensing the grid underneath, you know, that's something I'm using a lot as well as a compositional kind of armature, and I'm finding it very useful. So pages like this, I'm very much enjoying the kind of meta grids that are in, you know, these bigger shapes that are combined, like as these lines maybe line up on a grid somewhere, or these line up to each other. There's suggestions of interrelationships between, you know, a line here and a line here, and this line here moving down into here. There's just a kind of lot of ways that you can use Gestalt psychology to group these pages. You could like mentally group based on a color, you could mentally group based on shapes, you could follow just kind of suggested paths through the thing, you could follow the grid, you know, here this comes all the way down through right into the gutter like that. So it creates a real sense of unity and kind of musicality to the page, and you can see that all throughout the book. And then you add in, yeah, like these orthographic projections where you're pretty much just working on like 45s and 90s, or 60s and 30s and 90s or whatever. It gives you the ability to connect the page not just on a grid this way, but this way, which is something that I'm avoiding in Bound. I'm sticking entirely to the grid. But I think, yeah, for me, that would be the next step, is then adding the diagonals in, because then you start getting these much more sophisticated compositions like this. So really appreciate that. This also shows kind of the second subplot in the book, is that Mel and Matt go to meet this character, Julie, and they're going to get a mattress from her. And while they're getting this mattress from her, she starts telling Matt about this personality type thing that she's into, or that she's like a salesperson for or something. And it's 4 different types: generators, projectors, manifestors, and reflectors. And she's saying reflectors make up 1% of the population, and she's claiming, you know, we reflectors. So she's saying she's one, and then she's kind of suggesting to Matt that he's one as well. And so you can see just in this one little interaction here that she's like baited this hook and caught him with this idea that she's kind of sucking him into her little system. And so it's basically the relationship between Mel and Matt, Mel dealing with her medical issue and Matt dealing with getting involved in a romantic relationship with this Julie character. And that's what the kind of plot revolves around. And within that, you start to get these exposures of how Mel is kind of abusive to Matt. Here you just see, you know, some more examples of like the color palette changing. So you get a number of really nice color palette changes throughout the book, just more of the art. And this is where you learn she's telling her friend that, you know, she's been having trouble peeing, and she was saying like she's intentionally stopped herself from peeing halfway through peeing one night, and then kind of just feel like she trained her bladder to do that, but now she's worried about it. I didn't quite get what she thinks was going on with her body, but this is the scene where she explains it. So I'm going to jump past a lot of the book because, again, this I think is a contender for Book of the Year, so everyone should go read it. Just to show you that there is a more line-based style, there are some sequences where there's memories, and then memories takes on a much more clean line style with just a spot color fill-in look, which is also very well done. But I think when you compare it to, and this is something I'm learning, is that I'm liking line work colored in less and less, and I'm really preferring just shape with minimal line, because to me, like, this is just a richer visual experience with all these colors and shapes and stuff than this. I still love line work. I mean, I always love line, but it's just interesting to see that contrast in the book and see my own taste changing. But also in these scenes, you get a sense of how abusive Mel was to Matt as a kid, where she would have him pretend to be a dog. She was like leading him around on a collar, pushing him around like as an older sister, pretending that she's playing, but that they kind of have this like, you know, dominant relationship with her brother, and that is manifesting itself later in the book as well. I think is a pretty compelling like little theme and character study right there. And then here at the end of the book, I just had to notice again, because this is reminding me so much of the things that I'm trying. I'm gonna say right now, Ellice Weaver, I apologize, but I just promising myself that at some point I'm going to do an Easter egg where my character in Bound is going to wear this costume, because she also has the bun like that, and this is like kind of how I draw it, and the proportions are like the small upper body with the really long legs, which is kind of how Tori's proportion anyways, who the character is based off of. This is like pretty much exactly what that character would look like in clothing, especially with the bun and the dark hair and everything. So that really jumped out to me, because I was thinking about, you know, I was basically learning lessons from the art in this book the entire time I was looking at it. And I'm definitely going to go back and, you know, I just blew through it to try and be able to get a review up as quick as possible. But I'm definitely going to be studying the art in this book. So I was thinking about that the whole time. And then I get to this panel right here, and it's like, well, there you go. You know, yep, there it is. That's exact kind of the approach. So I very much plan. There's a scene in Bound, I know, where the character is going to go out in the snow, and I fully intend. I'll put it out here. I fully intend to swipe this costume as an homage to a book that I really enjoyed, and a book that is going to give me just a lot of good visual strategies to accomplish what I envisioned for my own work. Obviously, I'm not going to draw exactly like this, but there's a lot of compositional strategies and things that I find really compelling in here. And then on top of that, it's one of the most compelling stories that I've read this year. Ellice Weaver has one other book, which I've already immediately gone out and ordered myself a copy of. And this seems like a pretty young creator at the beginning of their career. And I just want to blow Ellice Weaver up as big as possible, because this is someone who I would like to read a significant amount more comics by. And so I hope that the books sell well, so that we can see more by Ellice Weaver. So please go out, get this book. You will not regret it. It's one of my favorite that I've got this year so far. Really enjoyed it. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us and help us keep this whole thing rolling, there's two ways to do that. The first way is through our Patreon. We have 2 different tiers of engagement there. At the first tier, you just get early access to our videos. At the second tier, you get exclusive previews of the books we're working on. So like the book Bound that I'm talking about, there's some preview art that I've been working on there. Sean puts up previews of his book that he's working on as well. And then you can participate in our ongoing webcomic experiment, Pranede, where you can help vote to control what happens with the story. Any of the money that we make from the Patreon just helps us buy the books that we review, so we try and turn that back into other creators and other publishers' pockets and keep this whole ball rolling here. If you want to support Living the Line itself and the mission of Living the Line, the best thing to do is support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his books now. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick
up. Like and subscribe and hit the bell, please, so Carson can finish reading his books and let me go home.